All right, we're going to go ahead and get started now. Thank you. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here for Legal Voice and together at this year's Cocktail for a Cause. Before anything else and before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. Legal Voice envisions a world where we are each seen in our full humanity, and it is essential that we resist the erasure of indigenous histories by honoring the indigenous peoples of the land on which we work and live on. Thank you. My name is Philippe, and I serve on the Legal Voice Executive Board. I have been a Legal Voice supporter for over a decade, almost 15 years. Now, as a member of the board, it's been a special privilege to aid our strategy and growth and see firsthand how we are advocating and engaging communities in Washington, Idaho, Montana, and in other states and federal avenues as the opportunity arises. While our nation, culture, and systems continue to change, Legal Voice's purpose and mission has been a continual source of energy for myself. Legal Voice's mission is to be on the side of all people facing gender discrimination so that they can live their lives with dignity, safety, and autonomy. Whether you're a longtime supporter like myself or someone who is new to Legal Voice, I invite you to find inspiration and hope in our mission as well. Now, we have an awesome program planned for everyone tonight, and it is my pleasure to hand the mic over to our next speaker, Legal Voice's Advocacy Director, Julia Marks. Thank you.
Very bright. Okay, can you all hear me okay? Yes. Great. Thank you so much, Philippe. We really appreciate the commitment and energy that you and all the other board members bring to us at Legal Voice, so thank you. And a huge thank you to all of our supporters who are here tonight. It means so much to see you here. In these scary times, it's especially important for us to spend time together and to remind ourselves that there are many of us who are working together for a safer and more equitable world. So thank you. So I've been an attorney for a while, but I've been an attorney at Legal Voice for 2 years. I've been focused on our work in Washington State. But I'm thrilled to be now in the interim advocacy director role on the shared leadership team, helping guide our extremely talented, motivated, and passionate program team. Can program team folks raise their hand? Shout out for those here, including you, Alize. Okay. So we've all been working really hard to stop the countless attacks on our fundamental rights, which have been going on for many years, but are accelerating in the current political climate. I feel very fortunate to do this work at Legal Voice. There are two things about our organization's approach that have been especially important to me and our work at this time. First, we're standing up across our Pacific Northwest region. Being a regional organization with an on-the-ground presence in multiple states makes us stronger. We're seeing and responding to threats that are recurring across our state lines, if in slightly different forms. And we get to support each other in that work and share knowledge and tactics together. Second, we're standing up alongside inspiring and brave community members and grassroots organizations. It's an honor to support and represent people as they're fighting for their fundamental rights and freedoms. We are always learning from the individuals and partners who stand beside us. We wish we did not have to do this work, but we do, and we're stronger doing it all together. One threat that I want to talk about this evening is the attack on trans rights. We're seeing this nationally at a horrific scale and also here in the Pacific Northwest. Our Montana team has seen relentless attacks on trans folks this legislative session. Montana just passed House Bill 121, one of the most expansive anti-trans so-called bathroom bills in the country. It was passed to exclude trans people from public life, including prohibiting lawmaker Zoe Zephyr from using the bathroom that aligns with her gender identity in the state capitol building. HB 121 requires public facilities to segregate bathrooms and other spaces based on sex, as falsely and narrowly defined as a female-male binary that's assigned at birth. This means that trans people have to use restrooms, sleeping quarters, and changing rooms that do not align with their gender identity or expression. The law applies to all kinds of spaces that provide essential public services where we all deserve to access and be safe, from domestic violence shelters to public schools, libraries, and government buildings. It also applies in correctional facilities where people have no choice but to go and then face serious harms. This law creates tremendous safety risks for trans, non-binary, and intersex Montanans. There's, of course, emotional harm. The law is stigmatizing and attempts to erase these folks and deny their gender identity. And it also puts people in physical danger, requiring them to use a restroom or other space that doesn't match their identity or their appearance, subjecting them to harassment or worse. My amazing colleagues, Montana Staff Attorney Robin Turner and Community Outreach Manager Mariel Vanderscher, fought really hard to stop this bill from passing, working with community members to try to explain all the harms that would come. They spoke against disingenuous and hateful talking points and statements by lawmakers that painted trans people as a threat. But unfortunately, the lawmakers did not listen and quickly passed the bill into law. As soon as the governor signed HB 121 just a couple of weeks ago, Legal Voice, along with partners at the ACLU, filed a lawsuit to stop its implementation and have it declared unconstitutional. HB 121 violates Montanans' rights to equal protection, to privacy, to due process, and to pursue basic necessities. 5 brave individual Montanans were willing to be plaintiffs in the case, standing up not just for their own rights, but for the rights of all Montanans. Last week, we won a temporary restraining order stopping HB 121 from going into effect, and we'll have a hearing later this month to try to stop it longer as the court proceedings continue. Montana has seen more anti-trans bills proposed and passed than ever before, and unfortunately, we know this fight will be ongoing in the State House and in the courts. Meanwhile, community organizations and individuals are coming together and speaking up. Unfortunately, we're also seeing, unsurprisingly, efforts to take away trans people's rights in Idaho and even here in Washington. Here in Washington, we've spent much of the last year fighting against a so-called Parents' Bill of Rights. That law undermined student privacy, making it harder for trans youth to get support at school, and cutting back young people's long-standing rights to access mental health care and reproductive health care without their parents being notified. It also chipped away at Washington's efforts to provide an inclusive education that talks about racism, LGBTQ rights, and more. And it created new administrative burdens for schools, distracting everyone from the important goal of supporting and educating our youth. This legislative session, a powerful coalition of our allies representing LGBTQ youth, youth at risk of homelessness, survivors of sexual assault, youth of color, worked tirelessly together to pass bills that amend the Parents' Bill of Rights, undoing its most harmful elements. Those laws haven't passed yet, but we're hopeful that the legislative fixes will pass soon. But the proponents of last year's Parents' Bill of Rights have already put forward 8 new initiatives to undo any legislative fixes that come down and reinstate their version of the law. They are not giving up the fight, but neither are we, and that fight will continue against the Parents' Bill of Rights. I also want to talk briefly about, or not so briefly, about our fight for bodily autonomy in the context of abortion rights and access to reproductive health care. As many of you know, Idaho has been a so-called leader among states in its anti-abortion efforts. Idaho has a near total ban on abortion, with very limited exceptions for rape and incest. This session, our Idaho team, attorneys Kelly O'Neill and Bill Mitchell, along with our senior reproductive rights counsel, Wendy Hypt, have been fighting against further efforts to restrict people's reproductive choices and access to care in Idaho. The Idaho legislature is controlled by an 86% supermajority of very conservative legislators. The supermajority is made up of a mix of white Christian nationalists, constitutionalists, veterans, retirees, and folks who've recently moved to Idaho who are hoping to find a place where they can live among people with their shared extreme political values. It's a particularly intense anti-abortion group of lawmakers. In early January of this year, our Idaho team learned that Idaho's beleaguered Attorney General, Raul Labrador, had confidentially requested that the supermajority refrain from introducing any more abortion-related legislation because his office is simply too overwhelmed by litigation, including our first-in-the-nation Matsumoto case challenging Idaho's abortion travel ban. However, one of Idaho's senators missed or chose to disregard the memo. In February, a lawmaker introduced Senate Bill 1077, which would create a $1 million grant funding program to support Idaho's nearly 24 unregulated crisis pregnancy centers. As you may know, these are fake clinics that exist to prevent people from accessing abortion care. They set themselves up to look like real health clinics. Their websites, advertising, and office spaces often look like a medical clinic. Sometimes staff wear white coats or scrubs. They may even use the word clinic in their name. But most unregulated crisis pregnancy centers provide no medical care whatsoever. They're actually anti-abortion organizations that spread dangerously false information about abortion, birth control, and STIs. The bill also contained a startling provision to implement a 24-hour waiting period and an informed consent requirement for any person seeking a lawful abortion under the rape or incest exceptions. Legal Voice has long worked to fight against unregulated crisis pregnancy centers through research and helping raise awareness. This meant we were well positioned to fight back on this proposed legislation. Our Idaho team quietly met with key members of the committee to try to prevent a public hearing, but there was immense pressure from Right to Life Idaho, the Alliance Defending Freedom, and others to bring the bill forward. We worked to equip members of the committee with practical reasons why the legislation should not advance. When there was a hearing, more than 24 people testified on the bill. The bill was ultimately defeated by a single committee member's vote and did not advance to a full floor debate. This was a major victory in the middle of the session, where the little spark of a bad law was put out through very intense lobbying behind the scenes with key members. Unfortunately, not a single one of those senators was swayed by a reproductive freedom argument. What tipped the scales? The bill was defeated by two arguments. There was a $1 million estimated cost, which turned off fiscal conservatives, and a secret weapon in the Idaho Constitution, known as the Blaine Amendment, which prohibits public funds from going to religious institutions, which is nearly all unregulated pregnancy centers. While the defeat of the bill was a bright spot in the Idaho session, it does sting just a little that the victory was built on arguments about fiscal restraint and strict construction of the state constitution, rather than a shared respect for the right to reproductive health care. But a win is a win, and we're glad Idaho will not be further strengthening unregulated crisis pregnancy centers. I just have two more things to highlight, and then we'll pass along to the next speaker. I wanted to share that we're still litigating our Matsumoto case in Idaho, challenging the abortion travel ban, a law that prohibits people from helping minors travel out of state to get abortion care without their parents' knowledge. We challenged the law for violating people's right to free expression and right to travel. People have a right to talk to others about health care and have a right to help them access that care. We won a preliminary injunction last year, which was then appealed to the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit ruled in our favor, in part, agreeing that the law's ban on recruiting a minor violated First Amendment rights. So people in Idaho and elsewhere have a legal right to talk to young people about abortion and to share resources. So while we've been working against harmful legislation being proposed and passed in Montana and Idaho, in Washington, we've had the opportunity to push forward proactive legislation, thanks to a more supportive political environment. I'm delighted to share that our priority legislative effort for Washington, the Dignity in Pregnancy Loss Bill, passed the House yesterday. Yay. Hopefully she's here. Legal Voice's awesome lobbyist, Yvette Magana, led the work on the bill. So what the bill does is it repeals an antiquated statute that's on the books that allows coroner investigations if someone has an abortion or experiences miscarriage or stillbirth. Subjecting someone who experienced a pregnancy loss to an investigation by a coroner, or worse, police, is stigmatizing and cruel. Law enforcement has no place investigating pregnancy outcomes. While this bill is important to protect all Washingtonians who may become pregnant, it's especially urgent for Black Washingtonians. We know that people of color, especially Black people, are more likely to be targeted by law enforcement and also face higher rates of pregnancy loss. The Dignity in Pregnancy Loss Bill is also a step toward getting incarcerated and detained people the care that they need here in Washington. The bill calls for correctional institutions and detention facilities to collect and report data on pregnancy loss so we can better understand the needs of incarcerated pregnant people and remind lawmakers that supporting maternal health is important to all of us, and that includes incarcerated people. There was a long, emotional hearing on the House floor yesterday. We're really grateful to all the folks who spoke up and shared sometimes painful and very personal stories to explain why this bill was needed. We're almost to the finishing line on dignity in pregnancy loss becoming law. Thank you all so much for listening as I've gone through just a few highlights from our work over the last 6 months. As federal, state, and local actors around our region continue to try to roll back gender equity and our rights to bodily autonomy, we are not hesitating to be springing into action and working together to fight this. Thank you so much for being here. And I will pass it off. Yeah. I will hand it off to our extremely dedicated board member, Ashley Walker.
Well, thank you, Julia, for the updates. And thank you to the development staff for putting this amazing event together and for everybody being here. It's been a wonderful event so far, so thank you to them. So I am amazed, always amazed by when I hear the updates from the team and feel this overwhelming sense of pride and optimism when we hear what our team is doing every day to ensure that everyone is able to live a life free from oppression. But I'm also aware of the feeling of exhaustion, anger, and frustration that we might be feeling during this time as well. Being here with you gives me comfort, surrounded by community and allies that aren't afraid to take action, pushes me forward. I've been involved with Legal Voice in some capacity since 2012, and I've seen Legal Voice grow and change. I have seen it struggle and push back, but throughout all those years, Legal Voice has continued to be a beacon of hope for me, not only as a woman, but also as a mother. Soon to be mother of two under two, so send some positive thoughts. As I look at my daughter, who's over there tonight, I am filled with hope for her future. But I'm also aware of the challenges that lie ahead for her and all of us in our society. And this awareness drives my commitment to the work that Legal Voice does every single day. I care about Legal Voice because they are dedicated to ensuring that everyone, including my daughter, thrive in a world where her rights are protected and respected, her voice is heard, and her potential is limitless. Legal Voice not only advocates for legal rights, but also amplifies voices of women, the LGBTQIA+ individuals, and other marginalized communities. They remind us that each voice matters and that together we can create a society where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. And that is why I am very excited to introduce our keynote speaker. He is a multi-talented author, poet, educator, award winner, and more. But tonight, he is here as a uniter, as a motivator, and a source of hope. So please put your hands together for Jay Mays III.
How y'all doing tonight? Good stuff. Do y'all want to do a poem with me? Yeah, y'all like poems, right? Good, because that's all I got for you today is poems, right? So the way we're going to do this poem, it's going to be really obvious what I want y'all to do, but we're going to do some call and response, okay? So when I say story time, y'all say story time. Story time. Story time. Story time. When I say true story, y'all say true story. True story. So the other day, I dreamt I was cuddling with a human-sized platypus. I stroked its beak and its tail. I wrapped my arms around it, and it made a sound I did not recognize. But that sound felt a lot like joy and calm and loyalty. I hear that's what some people call love. And maybe I didn't know what love sounded like until that moment, but that's not surprising to me, because survivors were like that. We're used to mistaking chaos for love. We've been trained to call our very realities things that they are not, so this clarity in my spirit was new. I woke up all rejuvenated and wanted to know everything about the love of my dreams. So I read every encyclopedia entry, read every Wikipedia article, listened to every TED Talk I could find about the platypus, but they all described it the same way. Said that it was weird and strange, that it had the bill of a duck and the tail of a beaver. But how strange does that sound to the platypus that you could be saying it as the tail of a creature it's never even shared the same continent with? It's like if it has the bill of a platypus and the tail of a platypus and poison spurs in its feet like a platypus, it's probably not a duck. It's like calling it a thing it is not. It's like when colonizers that called themselves scientists landed on what was once a black continent we now call Australia. You know, when they first saw the platypus, they thought it was a joke, that someone was playing a trick. They thought someone actually wasted their day gluing bills onto the faces of rats, so they tried to remove the bill from the face of the platypus and subsequently killed a lot of platypuses that way, trying to uncover the joke. Turns out the joke was murder, because they were insistent on calling a thing it was not. It's like, maybe my gender is a platypus. You know, folks always insist on labeling parts of my body things that they are not. It's like when Columbus landed on Hispaniola and Balboa landed in North America and Hawkins landed in West Africa, and they saw all these black and brown bodies. They saw men and women, and they saw something else they thought was a joke. Someone playing a trick. They saw all these people that lay between their understandings of gender and sometimes, somehow, even beyond them. You know, some at the time called us healers. Some called us just purely divine. Now some of us just call it trans for short, but to them, it was a joke. It was someone playing a trick, so maybe that's why. Maybe that's why they ordered us killed by dogs. Maybe that's why they burned us alive. Maybe that's why they tried to kill everyone that ever saw us as holy. Maybe that's the punchline, because the joke to white supremacy is always murder. It's like when they told us they were bringing us civility on black and brown soil, but what they meant was that they were bringing us the transatlantic slave trade, because they like to call a thing it is not. It's like, maybe my name is a platypus. You know, because when I say it, people tell me that's not what it should be, when really, my ancestors called for me and I responded back, And they told me there was nothing blacker than me calling my own name into existence, but to you, maybe it's a joke, and maybe that joke is suppression, because supremacy always tries to kill things it doesn't understand. You know, I hear abusers do that sometimes. Try to devalue things they don't understand and call things that they are not. So I may call that gaslighting. They may call it law and order. They may call it civility. They may call it a joke or a trick on them, a trick on their science, a trick on their biology, a trick on their power, a trick on their legal system, a trick on their supremacy, a trick on their superiority. But there will always be the platypus. Even when you laugh behind his back, even when you deny its power, its poison in every step it takes underwater, it senses electrical pulses to find its food and the things that it will prey on. It reminds me of myself and the ways that I sense bullshit and decide what kinds of energy I will or will not feed on. Even when you think I'm a joke, that my body is weird and strange, even when you call me a thing I am not. Maybe I'm not a platypus. Maybe I'm just defiance with venom in my walk. Maybe it is just my familiar. Maybe I'm just familiar with the ways white supremacy works. Maybe my familiar teaches me to always call a thing exactly what it is, and I call you. Thank you. Thanks, y'all. So I do have a few things more than poems. I do have another poem, but we're going to do some talking too. Is that okay? Okay. Where are my trans and non-binary and gender non-conforming folks in the room? Where are my trans and non-binary folks in the room? Okay, raise your hands like you're proud of it. Raise your hands like you're proud of it, like you're excited, okay? Now for everybody else, repeat after me, okay? Repeat after me. If you get nothing else from my talk today, just repeat this after me. Protect them at all costs. Protect them at all costs. Protect them at all costs. Thank you. So I'm grateful to be with you all in this moment because it is, it's always a joy to be with folks invested in the liberation of all people, but especially as it was said right now, like we are seeing in about, 2019, there was maybe 25 anti-trans bills introduced in this country, and now we have about 600 anti-trans bills introduced every single year, right? So the increase is astronomical, right? And we need more rooms where we can be together and honor the labor and love our communities give and build towards every day. I want to be 100% clear with you all, as we talk about gender justice, that trans people have always been warriors for gender justice. Since the dawn of patriarchy, colonialism, and imperialism, there has not been a moment where trans people were not in the fight for collective liberation. That make sense for y'all? Y'all get that? Y'all feel that in your bones? Okay. But there has been a campaign going on for some time now that has sought to erase our contributions and our lives. And I don't want anyone in this room to forget the history of trans people, because it is the history of gender justice and liberation. I think there is no better time to understand our past and brilliance as trans people than right now, because our communities are being erased and tested on purpose, and our solidarity partners are being tested to see if they will in fact leave us behind. So I want to take my time to talk about the legacy trans people have left in the gender justice movement. So everyone say, yay, history. Yay, history. Yes, yay, history. Yes, okay. So I want to first call out to my favorite ancestor, Victoria, who in the 1500s was stolen from the land currently known as Benin and was enslaved by Belgians while they attempted to misgender her and control her autonomy at every turn. She would make her own feminine attire and was referred to by the other Africans enslaved alongside her with words that translated back to things like healer and medicine person. When folks who seek to erase us tell the lie that trans people are new, I remember Victoria and how even under dire circumstances, she was true to herself and her community. I want to remind you about ancestors like Frances Thompson, a Black trans woman who survived the Memphis riot and massacre of 1866, where white men, including those that were self-deputized alongside policemen, targeted, attacked, assaulted, and killed Black folks. Frances went on to testify to a congressional committee about the gender-based violence white mobs were employing to terrorize Black people at a time when the US government was still trying to decide if Black people were even worthy of protecting. After putting herself on the line by publicly naming what she and other Black women were experiencing, she was outed and her gender identity was used in a smear campaign to target her and to discredit her testimony. This is a tactic we see today. Y'all seen that tactic? right? And so when I hear again the lie that trans people have no place in the conversation about gender-based violence, I think about the courageousness of Frances Thompson back in the 1860s. I want to name a Pacific Northwest ancestor, Mother George, also a black trans woman who, having escaped slavery in the 1800s, came to the Pacific Northwest and rooted herself in Idaho, where she delivered hundreds of babies as a midwife and doula with little fanfare, because that's what she was passionate about. Whenever the lie is told that trans people have no place in reproductive rights, I remember the gifts of Mother George, who was responsible with her own hands for bringing over 1,000 humans into this world. As we gather to celebrate the work of Legal Voice, I remember the non-binary ancestor and legal scholar that was Pauli Murray. After writing and publishing states' laws on race and gender, Thurgood Marshall hailed Murray's writing as the Bible of the civil rights movement. But Pauli wasn't just an expert in the law. Pauli was also a seasoned poet, a boundary-breaking theologian, and an activist who understood the necessity of direct action. Pauli wrote many books across the creative and nonfiction realms. When folks ask, where have trans people been when it is time to organize? I remember Pauli Murray and remind folks that just because you're late to the party doesn't mean that trans people are. Okay? And today, we have people like Queen Jean, we have people like India Moore, we have people like Raquel Willis, like Dane Figueroa Didi, we have Eli Berry, Sasha Alexander, and thousands upon millions of trans folks who are creating art, systems of community care, organizing interruptions to fascism and genocide, and making a path to liberation for all people. Because where the work needs to happen, trans people have already been there doing it and deserve to be held and honored for it. I also want to name that the movement has space for everyone. That means all of you, right? Has space for everyone. The movement for gender justice needs people who are organizers, but it also needs people to grow food. It needs people to fight in the streets, and it needs people who can build homes. It needs people to take the government to task with the law, and it needs people who can prepare a meal and provide medical care. It needs artists and educators. It also needs experts in healing justice and people willing to move resources. A liberated world needs and deserves your full self. As trans people come under attack in this moment, know that the rights that get taken from us will not stop there. We know that. Fascism doesn't have an off button if we let it run rampant. We must decide to be involved on purpose. We must understand what gifts we bring to the world and be unashamed of that. Okay? A few years ago, for me, when we think about honoring and honing in on our gifts, I thought, which isn't a bad thought, but I thought my one gift that I could bring to the work was poems, right? But as we learn more about ourselves, we can grow in all kinds of directions. There's so many parts of ourselves to awaken to the movement. From poetry, it became moving resources to other TQ BIPOC artists. It became direct action. It became Black trans liberation theologies. It became supporting reparations efforts. It became creating virtual spaces for immunocompromised and disabled folks in a time where there's no COVID mitigations, right? It became being present enough to learn new skills and being humble enough to do the work that needed to happen. I hope you all continue to find new paths and parts of yourself to share with your communities and for the greater good. And so in a second, I'm going to close it up with another poem. If that's okay, if y'all still like poems. Because if y'all don't, I don't know what else to tell you, right? Because you're going to have to deal with that, right? But again, we must protect trans people at all costs and protect the future of gender liberation by understanding the moment we are in and being involved on purpose, not by accident, not by waiting and seeing, because I promise you are needed right now, exactly as you are. Wherever you are in your place, in your development, you are needed exactly as you are right now. Okay? And so this poem I'm going to end with, it's for a queer lesbian elder who wrote poems that reached all over the world. Many of them love poems, but because she wasn't able to be fully out in her art, she mostly hadn't written any public queer art. And so when I think about the role for many of us in this movement, I want to be clear, especially for the artists in the rooms, that art changes future possibilities. right? It is through the arts, through poem, through music, through song that we're able to build the blueprints of a truly free future. It is an artist that it takes to create the world that doesn't already exist, right? So that other people and artists alongside those folks can continue to build towards that. So I write this poem for this queer elder, for this lesbian elder who didn't get to bring her full self in her work. 50 years after Stonewall, I am standing in the store rifling through crisp pages of a famous old lesbian's poetry book, created just months ago by beautiful butch hands that have become bitter from penning notes to her cis-male fictitious lover, invented for her conservative fan base and her elderly mother's weak heart. And it strikes me, amongst all these words devoid of her own emotional presence, that I expected her to write me a poem. I wanted her to write me a poem. I wanted her to write me the sweetest of love poems about my kinky hair, about my brown skin, about my smooth hips, about what two queer bodies must surely look like moving through the dark. I wanted her to write me a love poem about freedom. I wanted her to write me a love poem that would convince a father his 13-year-old trans son is still a child and not a leather-bound punching bag. I wanted her to write me a love poem that would house 1,000 trans kids that have not had a home to go to. I wanted her to write me a love poem that lets two boxer-wearing black trans fags hold hands down a dark alley and not feel fear of their neighbors or the police. I wanted her to write me a love poem that would have saved the lives of Tyra Hunter, Naja Morris, Tony McDade, Erica Keels, Blake Brockington, Maya Hall, and Sakia Gunn. I wanted her to write me a poem that lets a lesbian English teacher in Tennessee simultaneously keep her job and a picture of her first lover on her desk and her heart. I wanted her to write me a love poem that would have tucked me in at 16 and told me it was okay to want love, to try love, to feel loved, and that the real sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was about greed. I wanted her to write me a poem. Because to her other fans, it would have been just that. But to us, it would have been so much more. Thank you.
Keep it going for Jay Mays. Woo! Thank you, thank you. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you for gracing us with your talents and your motivation and your hope. For those who don't know me, I am Raquel Chavez, Legal Voices Development Manager. Thank you. I'm your last speaker tonight, so stay with me for just a few more minutes, and then we'll really get the party started, okay? I just want to say a final thank you to everyone here. Your work is what allows Legal Voice to keep fighting. And it means a lot to me personally to be able to look out in the crowd tonight and see your faces and your smiles and your tears, especially because I'm not the only one who's tearing up after that. It gives me hope, so thank you for being here. I will ask one last thing of you before I announce our raffle winner, which I know is why you all are tuned in on me. Yeah, it's a great package, I don't blame you. If you feel so inclined to spring into action, and yes, that is the last spring pun of the night, I swear, all right, I liked it, I thought it was funny. Please help us meet our goal tonight and make a gift using the QR codes on your table. And to stay up to date on all of our work, please follow us on social media. There are QR codes at the back table by the bathrooms over there and at our raffle table. If you just look around, it is not hard to find. So I'll give you a minute to check out your QR codes on your table, which links you to our donation link. Okay, now for what you all really want. The winner of Cocktails for a Cause 2025 raffle is, can I get a drum roll? Michelle Lucas. Woo! And that is our program for today. Thank you everyone for being here. Please check out our QR code and enjoy the rest of your night. Get home safe if you're headed home. Thank you.